So let's begin. Chaucer's is pleased to welcome back Gretel Ehrlich. Poetry, memoir, biography, nature. This author is so prolific, it is virtually impossible to categorize her, which is only fitting since she truly is a one-of-a-kind writer. Here's just a sampling of what she's written. To Touch the Water, The Solace of Open Spaces, Harp Mountain, Drinking Cloud, Stories from Wyoming, Arctic Heart, a poem cycle, A Match to the Heart, one woman's story of being struck by lightning, John Muir, Nature's Visionary, This Cold Heaven, The Future of Ice, A Journey into Cold, In the Empire of Ice, Encounters in a Changing Landscape, Facing the Wave, A Journey in the Wake of the Tsunami. It's truly mind-boggling what she's given us, the reader. While the subjects are diverse, the common thread of it all is the beauty of her words. And now her latest book, the Pantheon Books published, Unsolaced, Along the Way to All That is a wonderful piece of art. I know she's called many places home over the years, but we in Santa Barbara call her one of our own. So whenever Gretel Ehrlich comes back to Chaucer's in person for an event, or just to stop and to say hi, which I hope is very soon, I'll only say one thing, Okairi Nasai. It means Japanese for welcome home. Welcome, Gretel Ehrlich. Come on in.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get you to start
Let's
your
see.
video.
I'm having trouble coming on.
Okay. Should be a
There we go.
Hi, welcome.
Yeah, see me? Ohio gozaimasu.
Konnichiwa. So before we begin, I'm pleased to introduce Jane Hirshfield, a wonderful poet whose most recent ninth poetry collection is Ledger by Knopf. It's a book centered on the crisis of the biosphere and social justice. Hirschfield is also the author of two now classic book of essays, Nine Gates, Entering the Mind of Poetry, and 10 Windows, How Great Poems Transform the World. She's also done four books collecting and co-translating the work of world poets from the past. Finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, longlisted for the National Book Award, and winner of the Poetry Center and California Book Awards. Hirschfield is a former chancellor of the Academy of American Poets. She was inducted in 2019 into the Academy of Arts and Sciences. If you want a sample of her work, I suggest you go on to poetryfoundation.org, because not only can you read her wonderful poems, but you get to hear them as they were meant to be expressed. My personal favorite was All the Difficult Hours and Minutes. So please welcome Jane Hirshfield.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Gretel. I'm so happy to be part of this conversation and to get to visit even virtually Santa Barbara and Chaucer's books. So here
yes, and the same for me.
Yeah, so here.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you. I wish it was in person. Sometime soon.
Yes. Soon.
Yes. So in many traditional cultures, when a person walks into a house, they are asked only one question: have you eaten? As the first question. And I'm not going to ask you if you've eaten, but I am going to ask you the question, which has pretty much, become the first question of this pandemic time, because I want to acknowledge this is still going on. Everybody who is listening to us is in the midst of difficulties and sorrows and losses and worries that we have no way of acknowledging except to say, yes, here we are in it together. So my first question to you will be very simply, how are you doing with all of this?
Well, that's a big question.
Small question.
I mean, I started writing Unsolaced in 2017, before COVID, before all kinds of things that have happened. Oh dear, sorry. And it people ask me why unsolaced. So I mean, I was just thinking of it as being sort of like a freeway interchange of bypasses, of bypassing the way we used to all be together, and the way that we listened to stories, the way we traveled, the way we discovered new 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 places inside ourselves. And so, you know, um, I think for many it's imposed a kind of stillness, i.e., no travel, no visiting, no nothing, that's hopefully been nourishing for people. You and I have had some experience of that sitting on the cushion. But you know, it's always interesting to go inside instead of, you know, constantly entertaining yourself. Although we do find ways of entertaining ourselves, you know, with Netflix, etc. But also reading, I hope. So reading more deeply, reading um, the whole body of somebody's work, whether, you know, new or old, taking the time to um, go deeper, go beyond, you know, what we just want at the moment. I sort of hate the idea of, you know, making a click, and so you just click on one book or one piece of music that you've already listed, as opposed to that more panoramic view of looking at the whole shelf and taking off each book in the shelf, even though they don't have anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
You know, a really deepening investigation of what is.
Yeah. For people who have some experience of an austere and stripped down life, which you do more than most, given many of the things you describe over the course of Unsolaced and all of the books before, you know, it's not that unfamiliar to be living with less and to be living in ways that are deeply restrained. I think I had a book come out at the very beginning of the pandemic, a book of poems, which, like your book, is startlingly filled with references of going to faraway places, because poetry readings have taken me, you know, to a coal mine in Silesia and to the Svalbard seed bank. And I looked at these poems, you know, as the pandemic goes on, and I just think that's the old life. You know, even when this is over, I suspect we will be flying a great deal less. But anyhow, I want to get back to your book. And this next question I'm going to ask you is probably the longest question I'm going to ask. So it winds up a little, but so, you know, this is a book that chronicles many different forms of suffering. From personal losses, from being hit by lightning, to the ravaging and collapse of the biosphere, to the loss of Arctic ice, to being in Kosovo very shortly after the war and the genocide had mostly, but it seemed not completely ended. And, you know, I thought as I was reading through this book and your life's course that, you know, in some ways I have thought of the main course of your nonfiction books as being almost written documentaries, because you are included, but your eye is so often turned outward towards the people you are with, towards the situations you found yourself in. And, you know, at a certain point in this book, I thought, I never realized, you know, Gretel was a war journalist, using war in the broadest sense. But then when I thought about some of the people who you write about, when I think about, you know, the sections describing Alan Savory, the man who is through regenerative land practices and grazing procedures, reviving drought land in Zimbabwe, and, you know, the doctor, who I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, Rifat Latifi, who brought you to Kosovo, who's a trauma surgeon and trying to engage telemedicine in all the places where medicine is lacking, I thought, oh, maybe she's a peace journalist. And then I thought about, I said this was going to be a long question. Then I thought about in Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva vow and the figure of Avalokiteshvara, whose name means, if you translate from the Sanskrit into English, something like the one who hears the cries of the world and comes. This is the Bodhisattva of compassion. And I thought, well, that's also the work that Gretel's books are doing, and that this book is doing, is she is giving those of us who wouldn't otherwise have access some chance to hear the cries of the distant world, which to you are intimate, to you are long abiding friendships, places you have returned to for decades, people you have known over the great transition of climate crisis and the realities of melting ice and changed lives. And so I'm just going to ask you, as a diving board for you to basically say whatever you want, do you have some abiding sense of mission, of strategic intention? Or is it just that you're a writer and so you write? So over to you.
Wow. No, I have no mission. No, no, I am just so what do I say? I don't know, disorganized in a sense. I mean, I kind of rely on something that I would hate to name or figure out in any way, that just sends me, I mean, places or to be with people. I mean, it's hard to explain that. It was sort of like the way I ended up in Kosovo. I was lost in an airport, and this man was walking beside me, and then our planes were delayed, and we started talking, and the next thing I knew, I was in Kosovo. That's pretty much how I run my life. Although, I think it's wrong to name who you are or what you're doing or why you're doing it up front, because you have to have faith in all the stuff that's inside you, all the stuff that you've pushed in and absorbed and sponged and have read and forgotten and thought and forgotten, but it's still all inside you in a kind of molecular way. And I guess I have some maybe ridiculous faith that this stuff keeps fountaining up, like the volcano that's 100 miles down the island from me now, splattering some kind of path, like, go here, do this, go, return, go back, go back, go back. And so there's that. I mean, I'm really disorganized in the way because I don't want to figure it out. But of course, once I get my teeth in, I try to go all the way in, although one can always criticize oneself for not going deeply enough. There's no end to the depths, but we only have one lifetime that we know of.
No, I'm sorry, you have
yes.
at least 5 or 6.
When someone said, oh, Gretel, you've got to stop burning the candle at both ends. And I said, why? Why would I stop that? As long as I have the matches, I'll keep going. So now I've already forgotten what else I was going to say about that. But yeah, I think, it's sort of in the Japanese sense of following the brush, that you don't have an idea of what the brush is going to, I've done a lot of brush and ink things, just not very well, but I just like doing it. And really the whole idea of creativity, if you want to call it that, is following, what comes up, from the heart to the elbow, to the wrist, to the fingers, to the hairs on the brush, and and you just sort of see where it goes, and yet it's still going it's finding its form as it moves across the paper. Not to make it sound too precious, I'm just a rambling cowgirl, that's all.
Well, you sort of answered in advance. Another question that I was going to get to was exactly about this dance of, the accident of, somebody in an airport, but also, the accident of some magazine assignments that got you to certain places. But then there does seem to me to be also some things about your life and your wish for your life that you have made sure of. So, you had your first ranch in the high mountains and solitude, and you still have a ranch in high mountains and solitude. And that seems to me something that there's this oscillation between the accidental and the knowing who you are and what you need.
Yeah, and I think that's available for everyone. I mean, I just I have this longing for big mountains and to be above tree line, to be. I mean, I keep building rooms, or not really houses, but large rooms, small rooms, 1-room cabins, 2-room cabins, that where I make a platform bed that's surrounded by windows so that I can see the night sky. No curtains ever, no nothing. Just, it's this urge to see the horizon, to see the sky, to kind of be able to, I don't know, maybe just breathing. I just want to breathe fresh air all the time.
I did notice the moment in the book where it's a balmy 20 below and you open the window.
Yeah.
I thought, okay.
No, I like it. 20 below in the Arctic feels pretty good. It's, because it's dry, it's not humid.
Yeah. Oh, sure, 20 below nothing. Okay, so I wanted to give people a little chance to hear some things from the book, and I think it's time that we let them do that. And I'm going to start with something that you and I share, which is, so you got your copy? I'm going to tell you the page numbers, but you better have your copy.
Good, yeah, I got a copy.
I'm going to ask you to read some things.
Okay, I even have my glasses.
Yeah, good, excellent, and good light. Okay, so you and I both love horses, and I'm sure you can ride rings around me in your sleep. But one of the things that we share is this interest in what is sometimes called natural horsemanship or universal horsemanship or horse whispering. People know it by different names, and you write in the book a little about this, and I'm going to ask you to read something, and then I'm going to ask you something about it. So if you could start at the bottom of page 46 and go through to page 48 where the break is.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Let's see, 46. Where should I start on 46?
Near the bottom.
Okay, so this is a chapter about Ray Hunt.
Right.
That was the first lesson the human taught the horse, that it could look forward to a lifetime of domination and terror. Quote, the horse learned that when he was afraid to try like hell to buck the human off with luck, the horse won. A horse can always buck, Ray said, grinning. That's his defense mechanism. And you have to fix things up so he doesn't need it. A horse named Hondo in Tuscarora, Nevada, taught a young Ray Hunt to change his ways. Hondo made it clear that Ray could be broken, but that he, the horse, could not. Everything I know started with that horse, Ray said. Hondo was a striking, biting, kicking, bucking, tough colt who might have killed me. Day after day, Hondo would say, come on, try to break me and I'll break you instead. I had all winter to work with him. He was my only horse, out of the rough stock that year. Without him, I was afoot. It was just him and me. See, a horse that's had trouble can't believe a human will quit hurting him. I felt sorry for Hondo. At first, he wouldn't let me in the stall without striking at me. Finally, we got so I could get near him, then get on him. I'm not saying it was all love and kisses. Things got pretty physical, pretty Western. I grabbed a lot of mane when riding him, just in case. I'd go to bed at night and think about that horse, dream about him, then go back to work with him the next day. Finally, I took him to California to Tom Dorrance, the man who taught me so much. Tom was a little old bow-legged cowboy, but he's the brains of it all. He can fix a horse so fast you never knew what happened. And who taught Tom? He says it was the horse. As soon as Tom came around me, Hondo acted like a lamb. And as soon as he left, I'd be riding a tiger again. I couldn't understand. Something was going on, but I couldn't find it. Ray looked out over the young horses, then at me. See, I was too forceful. The timing was good, but the mental feel of how it could be wasn't there. The horse was afraid of me. I thought I had to hurt him to get him rideable. Ray leaned forward and ran his thick hand down the neck of the horse he was riding, then sat up straight again. I knew it wasn't right, and pretty soon I learned to give respect in order to get respect from the horse. There's a difference between firm and forceful, and there's a spot in there, inside the horse, an opening where there is no fear or resistance. And that's what I began looking for. By the end of the year, Hondo was smooth, athletic, and kind to be around, a horse the grandkids could ride. Should I
just
continue?
love that. Yeah. Well, I'd love you to go just the next down to the break.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he said, what I'm talking about is not dominating with fear, but more like dancing with a partner. It's all balance, timing, rhythm, the kind of dancing where your body and his body become one.
Right. So that is just, it is so beautiful and such a good.
It was Ray.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Ray was so extraordinary. And he was this kind of rough, tough old Nevada cowboy. I mean, he was a lot more than that, obviously.
Yeah, I got to watch a clinic with him. I was just, one of the observers in the stands. So I saw him.
Oh, yeah, but you can still learn so much.
Oh, I did. Yeah. I learned so much just watching him sit on his horse, even that, let alone what he was asking everyone else to do.
His hands were just so magnificent. Just the way he ran his hands down the neck of a horse, it said everything.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to do that right, much less the rest of it.
Yeah. And so I'm still trying to do it all and with the horse, but also it just seems to me this has so much to do also, from the second I began learning at kindergarten level, any of these things, be aware, notice the response, respect, don't dominate. It just seems to me, this is the Tao of relationship, whether with an animal or with human beings or with,
or the planet.
Systems. Yeah. Political systems, cultural systems, nation states, biospheres. It goes all the way through this theme of pay attention. And you don't have to make up what to do. You just have to listen and the world will tell us what it needs.
Exactly.
And that runs also, very much, I think, through the passage where you're talking about Alan Savory and his hope to change our relationship to land just by noticing that if you treat your
Exactly.
livestock the way wild animals would be living, which is moving from place to
Yeah.
place. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, talk about Alan, talk about, I don't know, how the humility of attention and how that might help us get through what is obviously a very difficult spot for the species, the planet, all species. So back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a big question.
I
Well,
like
you know,
big
actually
questions.
it was Jens Danielson that the Inuit guy that I traveled with for 23 years in Greenland on his dog sled, who said one day, we must remember to be modest in front of the weather. Of course, yeah, I mean, that said it all. That said, you know, and I guess in a way, all the stories in Unsolaced of all the people that I've traveled with or listened to are really all saying the same thing. That to be modest in front of the weather for someone who lives and depends on the sea ice at the top of the world for food and for travel, has the same set of problems and opportunities as the man with the horse, as the person with thousands of acres of grasslands, as as with Alan Savory with, you know, what he's really saying is that the truth the land will tell you if you just listen, if you look and listen. So it is that kind of, you know, refusing to dominate instead of, I mean, it has to be a total surrender, total surrender. You know, and people in America are so afraid of that word. They think, oh God, you know, you're doing something wacky. No, you're surrendering to the situation as it is, and sort of emptying out your mind, your hopes, your fears, your aggressions, your, you know, I want this because I want that, and or you know, grasping and rejecting, and you just sit there as the Japanese gardeners did of old, who would go through sit in a place for a whole season and then decide how the garden was going to look. And it's the same thing. And with our relationships with each other, our lovers, our husbands, our wives, our children, our friends, our dogs, our, you know, it's all the same thing. Like, you know, and Ray Hunt talked about, you know, we'd take our colts, some of them had never really been touched, and you put them in a round corral with nothing on their head, and you just, you know, you get them moving so they don't feel like they're being asked of something. You just get them to move and you don't interfere with them, and then you stop moving and you know, take a few steps back and you see what happens. And then pretty soon, oh, the horse will stop. And then if he's scared, he might look out over the rail and try to jump away because he thinks you're going to do something horrible to him. And then when you don't, oh, okay. And then, as Ray said, you become the sanctuary for that animal. You are the safe place. And then eventually he'll turn towards you and you might walk back a step or just stand there, and then pretty soon the horse will come and put his head in your arms. And then you don't do anything. You don't like throw the saddle on and, you know, you just meet the situation where it is. And of course, you know, we're, especially America, we're really lousy at this. And we all, I mean, I don't know, I have to keep reminding myself every day, like, wait a minute, you know. And I'm terrible when I'm driving a car. I'm always yelling at people. I mean, they can't hear me, but, you know, like, am I trying to be the cosmic traffic cop? Yes, that would be a really nice position. But anyway, you know, so I think as I think about all these people that, and Mike, the woman who taught me to cowboy, it was the same thing. I mean, she was just so quiet, always quiet with the animals, always quiet. And she'd say, you know, you have to anticipate what the herd is going to be, and, you know, notice the weather and what, you know, everything that's going on. And because the herd becomes an expression of the whole situation, and then you respond accordingly. So they were all linked. And you know, if I'd written another kind of book, you know, I thought of writing a book called Lessons of the Round Corral, that
Oh, yes.
starting with
Please
Ray
do.
and doing the, you know, moving out from there. But, you know, I was too restless. I had to keep going new places, and, you know, things unfolded in a different way. But, and Ray had invited me to travel with them, with he and Carolyn, his wife. I mean, he's passed away now, but, and I couldn't do it because I had, you know, I had a book due, and then I was hit by lightning, and then blah, blah. It just never happened. But, and if it had happened, perhaps that would have been the book rather than Unsolaced. But in a way, it would have been the same thing, that we have to, you know, step back before we step forward, and keep questioning, you know, what the other is giving to us and what we're giving to the other.
And one of the things which comes quietly forward in these stories you tell about these exceptional people who you just happened accidentally to always end up being with. It's quite interesting.
I did.
So I'm going to pick up on two sections so people can hear more of the book also, that carry on from this listening and take it, you know, another step forward yet, which is the places in the book where you talk about kind of uncanny ways of knowing, which clearly have to do with attentiveness and awareness. Your dogs are always manifesting it. But I'm going to ask you to read us two sections. One is the early section in the book where you talk about ranch ESP, and then later a section from Greenland. So if you'd first read, and then I'll give you the second one. So the first one, page 33, starting at the section break through page 34, please. I'm so dominating here. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I like it. It makes it much easier. On the midwinter night that my dog Rusty refused to come into the house at dark, I began to understand what an old cowboy I'd met at a bar in Cody called Ranch ESP. Rusty was sitting atop a manure pile looking south toward the lower field and wouldn't come in. That was unusual for a cow dog. He was always at my heel. When I went to get him, he whined and jumped up, nipped my arm, and led me through the lower pasture for a quarter mile. At the fence line, I saw a coyote chewing the back legs of a newborn calf that had frozen to the ground. Rusty chased the coyote away. My husband soon arrived and, seeing the problem, took off his boots and wrapped his socks around the calf's back legs. We carried the injured animal all the way back to the calving barn, with the mother following. The calf lived. Rusty had shown me the way. The way was right there under my nose, ludicrously close. I only had to pay attention. On another night in the middle of dinner, Rusty looked nervous. A snowstorm turned into a blizzard, and I knew something was wrong and found myself walking through deep snow to the horse corral. Snow had drifted into the three-sided shed all the way up to the horses' shoulders, and they couldn't move. Digging them out took hours, a little longer, and they would have suffocated. One autumn night under a full moon, Rusty clawed my arm and led me to the hill above the house, eager to show me something. A herd of elk had bedded down in the hayfield. We lay on our bellies at the lip of the hill and watched. The wind was right, so they didn't smell us. Rusty looked at me, looked at them, and back at me, so pleased that they were there, part of the family. The whole body sensorium is alive in each of us. Dog body, horse body, elk body, human. Sentience is as much about perceiving what others know and are, as it is about examining our own psyches. Knowing otherness feeds into who we are, and the shared communication binds us, me to Rusty, Rusty to the elk back to all of us. Sniffing, stamping, running, sleeping, watching, seeing, all converged. Unconditional living. Being alive was pure pleasure.
Oh, go ahead and give us the next two paragraphs.
Oh, okay. I seem to have this hair in my face. Okay. Another wet spring, when I was alone on the ranch during calving, sickness broke out in the new calves, quick pneumonia and scours. I worked day and night giving shots, dragging calves out of puddles of water. One morning at 5, a car pulled up. The ranch was at the end of the road and I couldn't imagine who it could be. I heard whistling, then Irv appeared. Heard you were having troubles up here. Let's get to work. How could he have known? I'd told no one, so I chalked it up to ranch ESP. He split wood for the stove, refurbished the vet kit, and out the door we went to save lives. We moved the small herd to fresh ground, fed them straw and hay, gave shots to the sick, and saved all but one calf. At the end of calving, he refused money. I didn't come for the money. I came to help, he said, and went home.
Thank you. And now, just because I love noticing the same chords appearing at different places in pieces of music, page 179, about halfway down where it starts, Greenlandic people are quiet. And if you could read all the way to the section break on 181, that'd be great.
Okay. Greenlandic people are quiet. When Yen spoke, everyone fell silent. He is a special person endowed with certain powers. One of those nights in the hut, he told an ancestor story from the time when animals and people were thought to have a dual existence. With no boundary between them, one was thought to be incomplete without the other. It was said that polar bears could even understand our words. When I was little, my father saw the track of a polar bear, Jens began. He followed it and came very close. He lifted his rifle to shoot the bear. He needed new skin clothing. And just then, the bear turned his head. He had the face of a human. The bear was smiling and said, "Take me, I'm yours." The dogs were scared and ran away. My father tried, but couldn't shoot it. He let the bear go. If a person has special talents, animals will come and ask you to be a helper. You are only asked once by a polar bear, but my father said no to him, and the bear ran away. We spent the next 3 weeks trying to find ice strong enough to hold us. When the weather cleared, we went up and over the ice cap. Crevasses gaped. We took air over a cornice, then careened down the other side at leg-breaking speed. Dog sleds have no reins or brakes. Jens put soft ropes under the runners to slow us, but it didn't do much good. He used his feet and his knees to slow and turn the sled as we slalomed down a rocky stream bed. At the bottom, we saw a polar bear track. Perhaps the bear had heard Jens's story and wanted him to follow. The dogs had not eaten. We traveled up a narrow fjord and saw a drying rack full of meat left behind by the last hunters who had camped there. Jens pointed to it, smiling. It's the custom to leave meat behind for whoever needs it. It might be for us, it might be for the polar bear. That night, the dogs ate 2-week-old meat, and we made soup and drank tea. Jens looked at his team. Man and dog go together. It's a good combination. We have affection for each other. We need each other. We belong to each other. Where they go, I go. During a rest stop, Memrit spoke about polar bears. The bear has no weapons. He is himself a weapon and can move on ice or water equally. We love seeing them. We admire them so much. He can walk on very thin ice or lie flat on all four paws and crawl. If he slides into the water, he uses his paw and leg to climb out sideways. And if it happens to us, we do the same. That night, Jens told us a bear story. I was in the tent when my dog started barking. I knew it must be a bear, and I grabbed my rifle. A polar bear was standing on a little hill of dirt and ice. He beckoned to me to come with him. I knew if I went with him, I would not be able to come back. So I said no. I didn't want to desert my family and the community. This is the modern world, and there is no place in it any longer for the person I would have become. He said that sometimes he knew when things were going to happen. I feel it, then I tell others, and it happens. I'm afraid of this ability. Sometimes it's vague, but it's there, and it's scary because I don't have control over it. I foresee things, and even if I fight against it, it happens anyway. I knew one other person who was like this. He was Kaleapalu, the elder son of Robert Peary and his Greenlandic wife. He could travel in his mind. He could sit very still, and I could tell he was somewhere else. When I asked Jens if he was able to do this too, very reluctantly he said, sometimes, yes.
Thank you. It's just one of the things I so love throughout all of your books and through this one is these echoing calls from completely different cultures, from completely different landscapes and ecosystems. And there is these threads of the same questions being answered. How can we live with the animals? How can we live with each other? How can we live letting the human drop down from center stage and the rest of existence stepping forward? So there was one more paragraph that tied into this theme, the one on page 200, which is basically where the book, you're very much a writer who doesn't give us a lot of comments and a lot of explanation. You allow things to speak for themselves through most of the book. And then at the very end, you kind of...
No spoon feeding, please.
Yes. Well, as you say about the book, you know, you can judge, but you can tell how much has been left out. But anyhow, if you could just give us this one paragraph, page 200, physicists have recently discovered.
Okay, just that one paragraph?
Just that one paragraph.
Okay. Physicists have recently discovered quantum entanglement, in which paradoxical and counterintuitive measurements of entangled particles result in wave function collapse. Or as one scientist put it, seeming impossibilities occur as when a photon that has not been born comes under the influence of one that is already dead. That's how those summer months felt. The boundless ways in which episodic fragments of experience and memory were torn away, sewn into a future that had not yet taken place, then conjoined.
Thank you. So you know, the knowing of unknowing is just, you know, there we have it a little science coming in to support the basic thesis of we don't know and yet things go forward. And they go forward very well if we don't intrude overly much. So I'm not going to ask you to read a section that was on my list. I have a lot of marks in the book. You know, you come home from Kosovo and you are leaving this place of genocide and graves and you know, no operating room. And so a loved friend, you know, dies in a doctor's arms because he can't do anything. There's no equipment, there's no sterilization, there's nothing. And you flew right back into the California fires from that. And you come back to Hollister Ranch and you know, you describe the ash on the hills as snow-like. And I think that is the one paragraph in the book where you go on to name our exploitations of the land very clearly, calling them out, calling out, you know, the oil derricks and the fossil fuel economy and all of that. And, you know, it just seems to me that this turn in the book towards a summary of the unsummarizable, really. I mean, the book is called Unsolaced, which, you know, so we always want people to, you know, we want people to have answers that we ourselves can't find in our lives, and we turn to writers often looking for, you know, this will help me go forward.
Right.
And you help us by showing us how other people have been going forward all along and how the animals go forward. But I'm not going to ask you to read the very end of the book because I want people to have the joy of discovering that for themselves. But could you read a passage that begins at the top of page 220 and runs through page 221?
Yeah. 220, 220, 220, 220. Okay, where do you want me to start?
Okay, I have to turn myself to find that out.
Something just
There was no
here.
doubt. Yes, that's all right. Your book cover showed up. Maybe it's telling us that we're getting near the top of the hour, which I know we are. I've been watching the clock. So there was no doubt. Right.
Okay.
Right.
There was no doubt that we had to alter radically the habitual practice of human dominance in the natural world. Back home in Wyoming, between my cabin and the meadow that lifts into big mountains, young pronghorn antelope were having running relays on sun-cured grass, and sandhill crane chicks had grown tall. Hatches of bugs appeared in swarms, and trout rose to catch them. There is no one keystone species in an ecosystem. All living beings are essential. But too many of our landscapes are half dead and lack the thrilling liveliness that could be there. Human domination has been ruinous. Plowing turns the world upside down. Overgrazing and undergrazing create deserts. Chemical fertilizers make the farm field an addict. Should I go on?
Yes.
Do we have time?
Yes.
If the two root causes of climate change are loss of albedo and land degradation, we have to find a practical way to cool an overheating world. Wild grasslands sequester airborne carbon in their roots. To stop climate change, we have to reinvigorate as much of the damaged planet as we can, the natural way. Nicole Masters, a soil ecologist from New Zealand, said, "We can't reverse the extinctions that have happened, but we can reverse abundance decline." 1 billion hectares of land under holistic management by 2025, 10,000 reindeer on the sacred land of the Sapmi, and a greatly expanded Pleistocene park in Russia with its massive grasslands and mobs of grazing animals carrying the ancient bloodlines of bison, horse, cow, deer, and elk that still know how to survive. If the square miles of grassland stack up, a panoramic liveliness will break out and climate chaos will be averted. Every blade of grass counts if we are to survive.
That to me is the hope that this book offers. The great trust in the resilience of every last blade of grass, which is the same last blade of grass in the Buddhist vow, not to go away into any state of contentment or even, full awakening until every last blade of grass is also freed from its suffering. And I feel that vow throughout this book. So
Thank you.
we had a couple of questions. One of them, I think you already rather answered. The other one, I recommend to the person who wants to know about the repercussions from being struck by lightning to read the book, A Match for the Heart, and then look at the life.
Well, I'm still alive.
Yeah, you're still alive, and
sort of. I'm old, but I'm still in the saddle.
So, rambling cowgirl, any last thing you'd like to say to your readers before we say goodnight?
Well, I mean, about climate change, which of course runs all through this, and which is, the root of my unsolacement, is that there are things we can do, like, keep grasslands and forests. Elon Musk could buy all of the cornfields in the Midwest and turn them into grasslands, and that would sequester enough carbon to avert climate disaster. So there is hope, but we have to, kind of look around. Where are we? What are we doing? Why are we growing corn? I guess I'll end with that. Why are we growing corn?
Well, thank you
don't be a victim of circumstance. We have a lot of horrible things going on every level, but we have to keep figuring out how to do things in simple, straightforward ways.
Thank you, Gretel.
Thank you, Jane. It's been lovely spending the evening with you.
Thank
you
you, Gretel,
do this
and
more often. Thank you, Michael. And thank you,
everyone.
Chaucer's books, my home bookstore, which will always be my bookstore.
Well, we look forward to having you back in person. Jane, we would love to have you down. I thank you both. It was a wonderful evening, and please, everyone, buy Unsolaced and go to chaucersbooks.com and have a nice evening, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.